there were some interesting things occurring in the 1960s and 70s after Nixon took office. According to a lot of files that I have and meetings with various agents, the Central Intelligence Agency started infiltrating the Drug Enforcement Agency at that time. I had an encounter in Aspen that was very strange, where they were having a convention up there. It was a convention in which an intelligence chief got fired several decades later. But in any event, I was told while reading a copy of Victor Marchetti's book at a cafe that the CIA had infiltrated the DEA and pretty much compromised them. Some of my intelligence network told me that was connected to the Watergate break-in. I do know that a lot of it goes back to the Tannenbaum-Rhea affair, where Richard Helms of the CIA and J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI broke liaison with each other. Nixon had to find out what was going on and hired the plumbers. Eagle Crow was involved and various other White House counsel and White House plumbers, things such as this. One of my clients during this area was sent to prison and was the roommate of one of the French Connection guys. He described to me how the the network was used for heroin importation from Saigon to Marseille to Montreal, down through New York into New York City. They crossed the St. Lawrence River, and a subsidiary mafia family handled things there. It involved a car dealership, and that's where they were smuggling the heroin in. They were putting it in the vehicles. In any event, during that period of time, a local DA here was rewarded by covering up the CIA, FBI visit to his office and putting a lid on the Tannenbaum-Rhea affair, where two intelligence agencies duped it out, sending my client, Mrs. Tannenbaum, to the state hospital for insane criminals, and my other client, Thomas Rhea, packed off to whereabouts unknown. In any event, at this time, there was a shootout at one of my clients' creamery, which coincidentally I co-owned with him. And it gave the newly formed organized crime strike force in Denver a chance to operate. Now, a lot of my people told me this strike force was connected to Air America, which was connected to CIA drug trafficking, which was sort of investigated by or cooperated with the Blue Hornets, in which my brother was a helicopter pilot in Laos. In any event, when the shootout happened at the creamery, everybody panicked. The young Turk named Joey Paulucci got taken to the hospital, and the organized crime people went to the hospital and recruited him as an informer. Now, this is where it really gets interesting. There was a crime group comprised of fairly rich businessmen that owned some warehouses. One of these warehouses got robbed every January. January in Colorado is where they have an inventory for the inventory tax. And all all year long. There was shrinkage at this lab, or excuse me, at this warehouse. And in January, they have a burglary, and a large shrinkage was blamed on the burglary, and insurance was collected and things such as this. So after this shootout, Nucci told the grand jury and told investigators that he was part of this burglary ring, that they were paid to knock a hole in the wall and stage a fake burglary so that these guys could collect on the insurance and everybody would be happy. Well, the organized crime strike force didn't care about the big insurance fraud, even though it was several millions of dollars. They wanted to get the Italians. And so as regional counsel for the Italian American Civil Rights League, Michael Foldino called me and said that the case was going on and referred a guy named Tony Ciccarelli to me. Ciccarelli, I'd known in college. He'd been a beautician in Boulder at a local hairstylist place when I was a barber up there. So I'd known him for quite a while. His family was prominent in Longmont and Estes Park, and he and my family knew some people in common at Estes Park that were doing punch boards and things like this at the American Legion Club and the local Elks Club. In any event, they indicted these people, and we were in front of Judge Pacheco. Another story I'll talk about how somebody bugged the offices of Judge Pacheco and how we got a mistrial and things such as this. This could be an ongoing sequence. In any event, they arrested Mr. Ciccarelli, and I got really famous for this case because I was the only lawyer in the history of Colorado that went in front of a judge at a bond hearing and got the bond raised from $25,000 to $250,000. It was rather humorous. They had an organized crime detective who was pretty organized in the way he lied and fabricated and things such as this. His name was Donald Molex. And he got on the stand. He was talking about the investigation, about the burglary, things like this. All of a sudden, the hearing is interrupted, and Molex said, my client's sitting like this, looking at Mr. Molex. And Molex says, Your Honor, Mr. Blewett's client just threatened to kill me and made an obscene gesture. Well, I was looking at Ciccarelli at that time, and I did see the obscene gesture. I think I was sitting on his left, and he made it with his left hand. He gave the cop the finger. So I stood up, and I said, Your Honor, I think I noticed the obscene gesture, but I didn't notice any death threat. And the judge looked at Mr. Molex and said, well, Detective, I didn't see the death threat either. What was it? And Molex said, well, he bit the first knuckle on his first finger, and that's the Sicilian death threat. And I got up to cross-examine, and I said, well, I saw the obscene gesture. I've seen it before in the courtroom. It's not on that uncommon, but I sure as hell didn't see the gesture. I said, I've studied criminology for a number of years. I went to law school. I did graduate work in criminology, and I never heard of this type of thing. And he says, well, Mr. Blewett, that's because you're not current. I said, well, where did you find information about the Sicilian death threat? I've heard of the Malachi and some of this other stuff, but where did you get this, Mr. Molex? He says, I read it in the Malachi papers. Malachi papers had just come out, and they got real famous. And, I'd seen the Malachi papers, and I'd read the transcripts of the McClellan report and the Kefauver Commission and all that other stuff. Never ran into it. So anyway, the end of the bond hearing, setting bond, in the preliminary hearing, the judge, I think it was Judge Egelberg, maybe, raised the bond to $250,000. Of course, the case headlines really didn't say much about the burglary and the cover-up and the immunity to the real criminals, but it did mention my name and the bond reduction, or the bond increase, which caused a lot of flack. Well, thankfully, later in the Denver Post on Friday, March 25th, 1971, there was big headlines that said that 2 charges against Tony Ciccarelli were dismissed. And that's because one of the complaining witnesses changed his testimony after he was cross-examined. He was charged with 2 obstruction of justice cases. And it said here, the case began recently in county court and was recessed when Ciccarelli's attorneys, Gerald Millman and Dennis Blewett, were refused a request to call Glasgow, which was the informant, to the stand. The prosecutor, under preliminary hearsay rules, had been allowed to testify that Glasgow told him of an alleged beating. Glasgow wasn't called by the prosecutor. However, the judge said that Glasgow should have been allowed to take the stand for the defense. When Glasgow took the stand in front of Judge Sanchez, which was the burglary judge, he took the Fifth Amendment 3 times. And they tried to use his hearsay testimony even though he'd taken the Fifth Amendment. Well, that didn't fly. So we got a dismissal on that case. Now they did, in the article, bring up another threat, and they talked about some other people that were clients of mine, and that Glasgow had signed an affidavit, supposedly in front of another lawyer, Marshall Quiet's office, which didn't really occur, and the notary public was forged. The notary seal was forged. Well, anyway, that was kind of an embarrassing moment for me, but it was a lot of fun. They were able to get maybe 8 or 9 organized crime trials out of the same group and made a lot of good mileage on it. One of the trials involved an alibi witness that they charged with perjury named Robert Quintana. And my co-counsel in that case was a guy named John Flynn from Phoenix. He was, I think, Rehnquist's law partner for a while. Anyway, John and I tried that case together, and a couple of interesting things happened there. There was another defendant who had a very young lawyer, and he met with us in my office in Denver, and he said, this is just like a graduate seminar, being able to try a case with you guys. And I looked at John Flynn, and he looked at me, and John just shrugged, and I shook my head. We go to trial, and John does a magnificent job of cross-examining one of the witnesses. And Mr. Chiari's lawyer gets up and undoes everything we did on cross-examination. He would say things like, Mr. Witness, you said this and you said that. Why did you say it? And God gave the witness a chance to explain every mistake that he made in his testimony. So this goes on for a while. And my client, Robert Quintana, elbowed me, and he said, can you stop this guy? And I said, no, he's entitled to his defense. He says, he's not defending, he's burying us. And I said, Robert, there's not much I can do. So it goes on for a few minutes. And Robert says, stop this guy or I'm going to fucking kill him. All of a sudden, the prosecutor stands up. And Alan Dill was his name. He was kind of a funny guy. And, had a good sense of humor. His father was mayor of a town. And I think his uncle was chief of police or something like that. And he said, Your Honor, can we approach the bench? And we get up there, and Dill looks at the judge, Judge Quinn, and said, Your Honor, Mr. Blewett's client just threatened to kill Mr. Chiari's lawyer. Judge looks down from the bench, kind of smiles, and he says under his breath, he says, or sub rosa, I guess he would call it. He says, well, I really don't blame him. He says, Dennis, do you and Mr. Flynn want to have a recess to go outside in the hall and talk with your co-counsel? And I said, yes. So we went outside and explained to him the ramifications of his dumbass cross-examination and told him to shut the hell up, or it wouldn't go well for any of us. We go back in. The jury goes out the next day and comes back with the verdict. And this really was embarrassing to both John Flynn and I. The verdict came back with not guilty on Mr. Chiari and guilty on our clients. So, the guy with the chief lawyer gets off. We lose our case to one of the big clients. So Flynn goes up to one of the jurors later. He says, how in the hell did you guys reach that verdict? He says, how could you acquit that guy? He was as guilty as our guys. The guy says, yeah, but we really felt sorry for him. He had such a bad lawyer that we thought we'd cut him a break. Well, that's the way it goes sometimes in jury trials. It's kind of a fun story. But that was back in the days where we really didn't have organized crime in Denver, but it was manufactured by the organized crime group that Mike McKevitt had formed to fight organized crime. Well, to have something to fight, you need to manufacture something. And I wrote about this 4 or 5 decades ago on a piece in the, I think it was one of the Boulder papers that I called the Radical Racket, Boulder Free School, maybe, where I said that, the government had to build radicals and build a radical movement in order to allocate funding to get radicals. I think both sides are doing it. The Republicans for years seem to have been better at it than we were. Anyway, there's more to this story that I will go over at another date. I think I did cover part of the other rest of the Flaxger case where they had a mistrial because the jurors were talking about it being a mafia case and how they fired a public defender in an adjacent courtroom because he wouldn't do what he was told by the state public defender and the judges and how the whole system was wired. Another spinoff from the Tannenbaum-Maria affair is some of the politics that went along with the revision of the criminal code in Colorado, the abolishment of the rules of evidence, the Bail Refund Act, where we imprison people on preventive detention in order to support the military-industrial complex here, and lots of other things that we'll theorize later. That is, if I get a good enough response on this stuff. Another thing I want to mention is I finally picked up a sponsor, and one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to redo my green tongue marijuana experiment, where I had people smoking marijuana stick out their tongues and show the camera that it didn't turn tongues green, no matter what the National Transportation Safety Board said, or no matter what they tell the police in their drug training manual. It's manufactured, it's voodoo science, and it's time we put a stop to it. So I'm going to do my experience so all of you show it. And it's going to be sponsored by the legalized marijuana dealers and hemp dealers, and hopefully I'll get some national publicity on this. It was a good experience. I did it with one of my students. I was on his PhD committee. His dissertation was on the domestic violence cases and social justice, but I thought it was a fairly decent experiment, and I hope you guys support me in this, and I hope I get a lot of readers, and I hope it goes ballistic, or as they say on video, viral. Please start supporting me so I can continue this. Thank you very much.